Hi, today I'm going to be talking about the state pension age in the UK and how it's changed over the last 100 years or so. Now, the first state pension age in the UK was 70 years old. This was the state pension age for the old age pension introduced in 1909. This continued until 1928 when the old age contributory pension was introduced. This introduced a state pension age of 65 for those people that paid sufficient national insurance contributions to have this slightly earlier pension. The state pension age for women was then reduced from 65 to 60 in 1940, and these two state pension ages of 65 for men and 60 for women were confirmed with the introduction of the basic state pension in 1948. Now, this situation continued for almost half a century until we saw some changes in the private sector. In particular, we had the Barber judgment in 1990, which was a European court judgment relating to pension ages in occupational pension schemes. And essentially it said that it was illegal to discriminate between men and women in relation to their pension ages. So we had to have sex-equal pension ages. Following this, it became clear that some changes will be needed in the state sector as well. So the state pension age was changed from the Pensions Act of 1995. Now, what this said was that we'd be increasing the state pension age for women from 60 to 65 over the period 2010 to 2020. So this was just equalisation, but it also became clear that we'd need to make some changes to pension ages in general. This is because longevity was clearly increasing. Now, life expectancy had been increasing for 100 years or more, but what we can see from this chart here is that most of the increases to life expectancy had actually been because of reductions in infant mortality. So people were surviving into adulthood, or were more likely to survive into adulthood. Increases in longevity for older people only really started in the 50s or 60s for women, but maybe only the 70s or 80s for men. So increased longevity for older people is a relatively recent phenomenon. Now, as a result, what we saw was the Pensions Act of 2007, which put in place 3 staged increases to the state pension age. The first of these, from 65 to 66, would take place over the period 2024 to 2026. The next, from 66 to 67, would take place from 2034 to 2036, and finally from 67 to 68 over the period 2044 to 2046. Now, after a few years, it became apparent that these increases might not be fast enough to keep the cost of the state pension under control. So the 2011 Pensions Act accelerated the increase to 66 such that it would take place by 2020. Now, this didn't just affect men, but also affected women in terms of the equalisation, because they were only supposed to reach age 65 for a state pension age in 2020. And it has caused a bit of controversy recently because many people believe that insufficient notice was given to women of this increase in the pension age. Now, it doesn't look like there's going to be any change to the state pension age in relation to this, but protests continue, and there's certainly a lot of lobbying around this issue to try to give some sort of restitution to women who feel they have been badly treated in this way. Now, a further increase happened with the Pensions Act of 2014, which brought forward the increase from 66 to 67 in the state pension age to 2026 to 2028. So over the last few years, we've seen not only the introduction of increase in the state pension age beyond 65, but a bringing forward of these increases over time. Now, in legislation, there is a provision to continually review the state pension age, and we've just had a recent review, the Cridland review, which does exactly this. Now, the government's decision on whether to accept the review hasn't yet been decided, but we have got some information from the Cridland review as to what recommendations have been made. And this suggests that the increase from 67 to 68 itself be brought forward such that it would take place in 2037 to 2039. So again, a further bringing forward of the state pension age. But it could be worse. The Cridland Review itself took a lot of advice from different parties as to what increases there should be, what would be needed to keep the state pension sustainable. A lot of these submissions were given by a range of different parties, but the Cridland Review did actually go out and ask the Government Actuaries Department for their view. And the Government Actuaries Department looked at two separate scenarios. The first of these was the 33.3% scenario, the second was the 32% scenario. Now the 33.3% scenario assumes that people in retirement would spend 33.3% of their life in retirement. So they would spend about a third of their life in retirement and 2/3 of their life working or before work. The 32% scenario considers the situation where people only spend 32% of their life in retirement. So they spend a shorter period of their time in retirement, you'd have a higher state pension age. Now under the 33.3% scenario, the Government Actuaries Department recommended that you'd need to raise the state pension age to 68 by 2041 and to 69 by 2055. But under the 32% scenario, what they see is an increase in the state pension age to 68 by 2030, increase to 69 by 2042, and then an increase to 70 by 2056. So some quite substantial increases to the state pension age there. Now, one of the challenges with increasing the state pension age is that it doesn't necessarily affect everybody equally. In particular, you find that people in higher socioeconomic groups tend to have a longer life expectancy. And what this means is that if you increase the state pension age too quickly, you're essentially giving a higher proportion of the state pension, or an increasing proportion of the state pension, to those people who are the best off, the people who actually least need a state pension. And this is quite an important consideration when looking at how fast you can really increase the state pension age and do it equitably. So hopefully that gives an overview of what changes we're expecting in the state pension age and what changes we've already had in the state pension age so far.